Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us for today's webinar, Top Trends in C-Store Technology, Which One Creates the Most Convenient Retail Experience? My name is Heather Reynolds, and I'd like to welcome you all and cover a few housekeeping items before we begin. Today's presentation is being recorded, and this recording will be made available for replay for those who are not able to attend this live session. If you object to participating in a recorded session, you may disconnect from the webinar at this time. The recorded link and presentation slide deck will be distributed tomorrow via email, and you may listen to the replay at your convenience. All phone lines will be muted during the webinar, and questions should be submitted at any time through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please use the Q&A feature to send questions to all panelists. During the session, we will have 2 poll questions for you. So if you could please take the time to answer the poll questions as they come up, your participation is very much so appreciated. I would like to introduce our presenters, Uli Seaman and Sucharita Kadali. Uli is Diebold Nixdorf's Business Development Lead for Service Stations and C-Stores. He drives and develops North America's C-Store business, including defining and developing market-specific solutions, such as market entry and market development strategies. And today we are fortunate to have our guest speaker, Sucharita Kadali, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research, joining us. She specializes in retail digital transformation in large B2C companies and has startup and retail experience, including store operations, marketing, and merchandising. So welcome, Uli and Sucharita. And at this time, I will turn the presentation over to you, Uli.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody, also from my end. Uli Seemann speaking. Today we want to talk about the effects to the C-Store of the new customer demands or enhanced customers' demands on your services, how we can influence the perception of the customer with self-checkout and cashierless self-checkout systems. On the other side, also, how can we optimize the drive of growth and the bottom line? What does it really mean to get a self-checkout concept introduced in an existing POS environment? And lastly, also, how can you leverage your own data to turn it to a truly customer personal experience during the shopping journey in your stores? So with that, I would like to hand over to Sucharita to get the presentation started.
Thank you, Uli. Thank you for that introduction. For those of you who may not be familiar with Forrester Research, Forrester is a technology research company. And as Heather had mentioned, I focus very specifically on retail. And we can go ahead and jump to the next slide. I am going to up-level the conversation a little bit and start with other aspects of Forrester's research and the applications of technology in physical stores that I am seeing retailers integrate that both have value for the consumer experience as well as profitability for retailers as well. And of course, a significant part of the presentation is also going to be spent on self-checkout and automation solutions as well. When we step back and look at why do shoppers even go to C-stores, what are what's the value, why are the reasons for the transactions? And this goes beyond just, of course, you need to perhaps get fuel, or you may want to pick up a lotto ticket or cigarettes. Consumers do appreciate being able to touch and see merchandise before they purchase it, so that's why they will will, often go into a physical destination. C-stores offer immediacy. They are ubiquitous around the world, and the ability to get the products that you know will be there and to get in and out fast are particularly compelling reasons why consumers choose to purchase the items that they do choose to purchase at those C-stores versus other places that could be comparable venues for those products as well. And another piece that is an opportunity is that a significant portion of consumers do use coupons in the course of their physical store transactions. And a number of consumers actually like using coupons with a number of the types of products that you see in C-stores, such as for cigarettes or even for consumer packaged goods. So these are all important and compelling things to keep in mind. Now, on the next slide, what I want to talk about are the higher level data points that we have around technology integration in stores and how they relate to C-stores in particular. One of the first big trends in retail that we have seen evolving is, of course, the growth of mobile devices and the growth of retailer apps. Now, the truth is that most retailers actually are not well suited to mobile apps because they don't see their customers all that frequently. If you were to take the average retailer, they may see their customer only a few times a year at best. And in those cases, an investment in a mobile app doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. In the case of C-stores, however, which can see their best customers multiple times a week, this type of a shopping environment is actually perfect for a mobile app. And the types of transactions and the frequency of the transactions also are well suited to thinking about digital wallets as well. So on the next slide, what we have here are some data points around how consumers are actually using mobile phones in physical stores. And not surprisingly, as I'd mentioned, the coupon usage is relatively high. It actually surfaces as number 1 and number 2 for consumers, and accessing and being able to track loyalty points is number 3. So for any retailer, including a C-store retailer that sees your best customers frequently, this is an opportunity for engagement. This is an opportunity for a consumer actually going out of their way to conduct a transaction with you versus anyone else in the competitive set that they may go to, whether it is another C-store, another gas station, or even another mass merchant that may carry some overlap of the merchandise as well. Next slide. Another piece of the equation that is important to keep in mind, which is a corollary to thinking about these consumer-facing mobile solutions, is also the trade-off with what consumers are willing to share in exchange for you gathering information from them, such as their store location, or even being able to provide them other benefits like, say, Wi-Fi. And the data on the bottom, I think, really highlights that, is that consumers are willing to share some of their mobile location information in exchange for things that may be customized to them with respect to product offers or discounts. Next slide. The other piece of the mobile app and the utility in a physical store experience that we've often had conversations with small format retailers about are the different approaches to even thinking about redemption, for instance. And a number of brands have actually cited challenges with redemption as a reason why they don't make offers, like, say, for instance, coupons, more prevalent in channels like C-stores. And in large part, that is because of some of the challenges with managing a paper trail, and that can sometimes be an obstacle. But what we are discovering, both from a consumer adoption standpoint, as well as what exists from different solutions that enable digital redemption. So it can be anything from applying a savings automatically at checkout to printing, of course, printing a flyer, but also scanning and having load to loyalty programs. So if you already know that a shopper is engaged in the program and you've leveraged a tool like Wi-Fi to know who a person is, to be able to then automatically apply that promotion to that person's transaction is something that the consumers certainly are finding is increasingly of value to them. So next slide. We also find that digital wallets are emerging in their growth. And the most popular digital wallet that consumers are using today is PayPal. And we're certainly seeing that there is growth, particularly in stores, for solutions such as Apple Pay. And the ability for consumers to pay via their phones is increasingly becoming more familiar to them. We have closed loop systems like Starbucks, which are increasingly training customers to use digital wallets and making them familiar with using the store's own app in order to drive that transaction. And of course, the benefits that shoppers get from completing the transaction through that method versus another one is part of the reason that consumers are doing that. And that brings me to the next point about loyalty programs. And we know that a number of the larger C-store chains already have loyalty programs in place. What I would encourage every C-store to really think about, though, is what you are doing more than just simply a rebate program, because that is one of the challenges with loyalty programs throughout the retail ecosystem, is that they are a spend more, get more benefits program, which is certainly contributes to top line incrementality, but is really margin eroding, because ultimately these are simply cash back or some type of a promotion back in exchange for giving the retailer some customer information, or get it for the retailer to get that customer information. But some of the things that I would encourage on the next slide for C-stores to think about, or to be more creative about the benefits that you provide to customers in the course of extending a loyalty program, and knowing that there are ways to use tools like your app or your digital website to support some of the benefits that you provide. The data on the right-hand side is very interesting, and every time I share this with a retail executive, they're always surprised by what is here, which is it's consumer data around what do you want in a loyalty program. And certainly consumers do reinforce that which is already out there, which most C-stores are likely providing insofar as they have a loyalty program. It's things like points and incident discounts. But the red bar on the bottom is really, really interesting, because one of the things that consumers say they want is just the ability to provide feedback to the merchant. And that is something that doesn't really cost anything to a merchant, but yet is also incredibly valuable, because think about the number of merchants that are conducting customer market research and are actually paying for that market research. Well, this data is saying that not only do you not need to pay for a lot of market research, but some customers will actually reward you with their loyalty by using them as a market research source. And an example of a company on the left-hand side that has done this is Target, which does have an app that it gives to some of its best customers to actually get feedback on new products that they're launching. Now, it doesn't have to be just new products, because C-stores usually don't launch a lot of new products through the course of the year. But if there are other questions that you may have about how shoppers are behaving, or what they want more of or less of in a C-store experience, these are great ways to offer value to customers in a way that's scalable, that is relatively less expensive than the traditional benefits that loyalty programs provide customers. So the next slide is about technology from the standpoint of data-driven merchandising and taking advantage of all of the different inputs that a merchant has from so many different sources and improving the overall execution of the store. So what are some examples of that? On the next slide, one of the best examples of data-driven merchandising is, of course, anything and everything that you see in any Amazon retail experience, whether it's the Amazon website, an app, or even the Amazon Go store, which, of course, is probably one of the biggest things to have really impacted the C-store environment in a number of years. And what Amazon in particular has done is really what I would describe as the poster child of data-driven merchandising. It's taking advantage of machine learning and resources, data points in areas ranging from the product search rankings to recommendations to fraud detection to every single type of input, such as where consumers may be walking in a store, what's in stock, what's out of stock, what's the velocity of different items, what are things that people may be looking for that you don't currently stock, or are there ways to capture information about reasons that people may have come into the store and then walked out empty-handed, and that can have tremendous repercussions for what you ultimately choose to stock, or what you could choose to test, or what you choose to have in different locations. So the next slide is about also taking advantage of other inputs and creating inputs where possible. This is an example of a shelf actually in Eastern Europe that has sensors put into the shelf. And often a number of sensors that we see integrated into shelf technology are really about just walk out technology. It's about cashierless transactions. It's camera vision. It's enabling customers to purchase and walk out without having to actually, kind of swipe a credit card or pay with cash. But what's interesting about solutions like these are that they have a number of different use cases, and it can be as simple as simply counting people who walk by or stop in front of a shelf. There are increasingly sensors that can gauge emotion and emotional reaction. So this is great technology that can help support brands and brand manufacturers that are very interested in getting access to that kind of data. It can also, of course, alert you if there are shelves that may need to be restocked, or if items have been placed incorrectly. So there are any number of use cases that exist for these kinds of solutions that are really becoming increasingly popular as inputs into improving the products that ultimately are on shelves. The next slide is about leveraging data points that can be crowdsourced as well to support anything from a store fixture to what goes to a different store in a different place, or even also getting a sense of which stores are better run than others. And there are companies out there that actually create jobs for shoppers in a community by crowdsourcing things like tasks such as store compliance. So some of these tools are companies like Go Spot Check and Forge, and what they do is that mystery shoppers can be sent out to different retail environments like a C-store to take photos of certain store fixtures or the way that certain products are laid out. And those are then fed into a central database that brands or companies can look at to make sure that different stores and different geographies have been set up according to various planograms or rules and standards by which brands may have asked for, and that retailers at the corporate level may have agreed to. So these are all extremely powerful ways to both improve the customer experience as well as the experience of individual store operators that have a lot of very complex things to think about and a long list of to-dos ranging from inventory management to customer service through the course of a given day. The next slide is about leveraging stores as media and really taking advantage of screens as a new monetization channel. So on the next slide, what I think is really, really important to keep in mind is that one of the things that C-stores have to their advantage is lots of traffic and the flow of customers into their stores. Often the association with fuel is a big driver because that has not yet been digitized in a major way, and what we see are increasingly screens that are in these small store format environments, whether it's in a C-store like a Circle K that may actually have a screen that is merchandising products that are being sold in that store. They're enticing consumers to try new products. They can be advertising from brands that are looking to promote new products, or even local advertising that can be leveraged to drive awareness about a new product or a service that could be relevant to that particular C-store's audience. We also see some stores, the example on the right-hand side is a screen that's mounted to the exterior of a store that also doubles as a vending machine. So it can be a touch screen where a consumer can actually purchase a product through that medium, but also when it's not in use, it can turn into some type of an advertising screen or a messaging screen that can be anything from what that store chooses to message at that moment in time to an ad roll in which that merchant may be able to collect some incremental revenue because it is able to deliver impressions to advertisers about anything from national brands to local merchants. On the next slide, I just thought this was also a really interesting example because we don't see a lot of this in the United States, but it is taking the idea of these screens even further and actually making them adjacent to where consumers are actually filling their vehicles with fuel. And the screens on the left-hand side are large format touch screens that both have advertising as well as information that the consumers may find interesting that particular store would want to communicate. This was actually an example in South America, which I think is fascinating because in some of the developing markets we're actually seeing more sophisticated renderings of what the future of stores can be than even in a market like the United States, which has a very, very mature retail infrastructure, but yet one that in many ways still has old technology that can be updated. Next slide is thinking about e-commerce returns and shipments and leveraging C-stores as destinations for e-commerce shipments and returns, which, as we know, are an increasingly large part of the overall retail ecosystem. We can go to the next slide. You've probably seen different iterations of locker solutions where consumers can walk in and they type in a code and they can retrieve packages, they can put items back for returns. And what this does is takes advantage of destinations where consumers may be anyway. It helps them get in and out of such a transaction quickly. It also helps to enable them to do things efficiently because they may be at this destination, at the C-store anyway, and to be able to do two things at once is always something that consumers like. And the idea, now these particular images we have are located on the interior of different stores, but these are actually solutions that can reside in the exterior exterior of a C-store environment as well, which is something that we've seen some type of vending machine solutions like Redbox doing over the years. And that can be very, very favorable for C-stores because you're not taking you're not cannibalizing any of the existing square footage of the store. You're taking advantage of the exterior, which is likely to have been unmonetized anyway. And now you not only give consumers a new reason to come to the store for perhaps an incremental visit that may not have happened before, but it actually is space that can be monetized. It's essentially like curb space that can be monetized because in many of these cases, the locker solution owner pays a fee in order to basically rent that convenient space. And we do anticipate that that lockers will continue to grow in the United States, if for no other reason, because a number of dense urban areas are finding that their city councils want to cluster deliveries wherever possible. It's far more efficient to be clustering things like this versus to be sending an umpteen number of trucks into neighborhoods multiple times during the course of the day. And certainly as postal services become more challenged, and we know that the U.S. Postal Service is incredibly challenged and will likely raise its rates and think of new ways to consolidate transactions. We will likely evolve, at least in some markets, to solutions like what Canada has, with where Canada Post actually has a significant percent of its citizens receiving mail in clustered lockbox solutions as well. So this is something that we see as an area of growth. It leverages technology because the opening and closing is all app-based, and this is something that C-stores are well suited to because of the superior locations that they tend to have. So my last set of slides is really about the heart of what Uli is going to talk about, and technology being the store automation component as a way to really drive value for C-stores. And on the next slide, what I want to talk about is that there are many different ways to think about automation, and we can think about automation as automated vending machines or robotics, or certainly cashierless commerce like Amazon Go. And what they all can do and have the potential to do is create entirely new categories within the C-store environment. So what I thought was really interesting about some of these examples are like, whether it's serving gourmet, espressos and lattes and cappuccinos, which may be somewhat of a challenge in some C-store environments. The ability to have, vending machines with co-branding by a brand like Starbucks can be incredibly powerful. And there are machines like the example that it's actually a machine from a company called Zune Pizza on the bottom right-hand side, which can introduce concepts like freshly baked pizzas in C-stores, because it is a robot that essentially assembles that pizza and places it in the oven so that there is relatively little human activity that's needed, and there's not the need for kind of any type of store within a store to actually execute something of that nature. But when we think of automation, on the next slide, what we really are thinking about is ultimately different forms of checkout. And when we look at different forms of checkout, there are a number of different approaches that are different than simply a customer going to a POS terminal and either handing over cash or paying with their credit cards. There are, of course, vending machines that support automation in the process. There are store-provided devices. So that is where a consumer would take a handheld that belongs to the store and actually goes through a transaction on their own. Those are better suited for larger format stores, kiosks, of course, and then the solution, which is the opposite of the store-provided device, which is a consumer leveraging their own device and using that as a form of payment. So on the next slide, what we have here are when we take something like checkout and you look at what are the different ways that consumers would actually like to pay, there are many different segments of different types of consumers, and that's really where some of the great value here is. So when we look at something like checkout, while a relatively significant portion of people are just happy going to a store associate and paying in a traditional way, there is a non-trivial percent, more than a quarter of consumers that actually want to pay with their own device. And there is a double-digit percent that are actually also open to paying with the store's device, but not having to be necessarily assisted by a store associate. So providing these multiple ways to pay helps to reduce any type of friction that exists in that transaction process. And Uli has a lot of data points around, the amount of friction that even exists in C-store environments. So next slide is a little bit of a more nuanced look at this. So I talked to you earlier about the different approaches to automation at checkout. And what we have here is data from the US, UK, and Canada from consumers of the percent of consumers who are using any of these alternative means of checkout, which is in the green, and in the yellow, the percent of consumers that are interested in these types of approaches in the future. So we do have the most popular across these markets being store employees leveraging mobile devices, but we also have freestanding interactive touch screen displays, which are essentially kiosks, also not only being used by a double-digit percent of consumers across these markets that we did have the survey information for, but there's also a significant interest in this in the future too. And given that this is still very emerging, we think that these numbers will only go up over time. The other two pieces to keep in mind is that there is a percent of consumers that are interested in using their own devices, and then least popular of all here are those handheld devices provided by a store. As we said, they can be somewhat cumbersome, and in a C-store environment, they probably make the least sense. So the next slide is just a summary of these different technologies that we talked about, everything from mobile apps to the ability to leverage a loyalty program and new benefits in the form often of a mobile app, to think about data-driven merchandising, to support the store experience, delight customers, and drive better value for the C-store itself, leveraging stores as media given the amount of foot traffic that so many C-stores still continue to get and will continue to get into the future, leveraging the growth in e-commerce as a way to provide a win-win for both C-stores as well as other partners in the retail ecosystem. And finally, the big point being the opportunities to leverage checkout automation in a C-store environment in order to drive incrementality and value for the merchant as well. And that brings me to the end of my presentation, and now back to the Diebold team.
Thank you, Sucharita. So here's Uli again. I will take over from here, and we'll discuss a little bit with you guys how can we help and how can we leverage all the information Sucharita was sharing with us in order to improve the customer journey in C-stores and how to enhance and improve our business capabilities. So we want to address 3 different topics with our proposal here, with our solution. The first one is improve the customer experience, improve the experience of the customers during the short customer journey in the C-store. We all know about the labor challenges, find labor, pay labor, and have every shift covered with enough staff in order to make checkout and all the processes in the store as efficient as possible. And obviously, everybody is excited and interested in having the highest possible revenue and also secure the market share. And how can we do that? So let's go into the presentation. So first of all, we, as well as the next colleagues, that we did an analysis of what is the typical shopping journey in a C-store. And as everybody know, it's quite short. We have about 70 seconds where the customers pick their items, and during this time, they're always checking already what's going on the checkout point, and do I have to expect queues? Can I get in and out here quite fast? Is the shop, which is supposed to be a convenience store, really convenient for me? They spend, as you can see, half the time at the end of the day, more or less, at the checkout, during the checkout process, queuing up and executing the payment at the end of the day. So what we want to address here is how can we shorten that even further, enhance the customer experience, and avoid that they get any kind of bad impression of speed of transaction, of services they receive, in order to make them as a loyal and returning customer, rather than having this bad experience and not showing up at all anymore at the store. And that means in many cases, not only not showing up in the store, also don't use the forecourt anymore. So you're losing for a while a customer until he maybe gets the same or a bad experience in the store across the street and hopefully comes back. So what's the expectation of our customers? Please go to the next slide. One of the expectations, and this is basically based on their experience they have out of airports, grocery stores, and also lately a lot out of QSR stores, like McDonald's, who are automating their processes, their selection process and their checkout process quite a lot. The expectation of today's customers is that there is some way of automatization of their checkout process. Saturita showed a couple of different ones, like mobile payment, but also self-checkout. A lot of our consumers believing that providing self-checkout, it is a faster process. It will help to bust queues, and it's certainly the case. The lines are shorter. This depends at the end of the day, obviously, also how you set up your self-checkout lines and the self-checkout implementation, and it's easy to use. So the impression is it's a positive experience. It's an experience I can influence by myself, rather than I have to be dependent on the queue and an attendee who's checking me out slow or fast. So that's the one area. How do we improve the customer experience? By providing them a new way, a new journey. The second piece is labor and the labor challenges we have today. Everybody has to fight with the high turnover rate. It's more than 100% in many, many areas of the United States at this point. And the minimum wage discussion is going on since a long time. Here in Texas, where I live, it's $7 something. But if you go to the C-stores and they offer jobs, it's always going into the $13, $14, $15 range already. So the cost of labor is behind of IT cost, the second highest cost, and it's probably increasing further. And with a low unemployment rate, it will be even more and more difficult to get staff at all on board. And that means at the end of the day, with the few people we have, we can gain for the operation of our store. We need to ensure that we use them as efficient as possible. We made a couple of studies with existing C-stores, and we did recognize you can drive more than one checkout point if you place self-checkout equipment properly. So let's go to the last one. And regarding our topics we want to address, as you know, we are supporting a lot of QSR restaurants and other areas with self-checkout and kiosk solution. And our own data and the data of our customers are providing clearly the feedback. There is an immediate increase of the basket size, and specifically around food, it's quite easy to explain as well. Nobody needs to argue anymore against an attendant why he's supersizing, yeah, why he's using the larger fries, why he's using the larger burger, the larger sodas, and so forth. So in that areas, you see immediately these increases, which are going up to 30%. And on the other side, because you offer these new kind of services, these additional services, the market share does increase, and you are offering better services than the stores around you. So people are tending to join, to stop by at your store rather than to go to the other one, the traditional one. So that helps a lot in order to drive business as well. But there's an opposite side. So if you go on, we want to make a quick poll. I mean, self-checkout, as I mentioned before, everybody knows it since many, many years out of different business verticals. But in C-stores, there is not much self-checkout support implemented. And we want to make a quick poll. Please vote why you think that this is the case. So you have there are 3 selection points. Please go ahead and make a quick selection, and I go ahead with my presentation right afterwards. Give you a minute or so.
Yes, thank you, Yuli. So yes, at this time, if you could go ahead and you could answer our question, what is preventing you from implementing self-checkout there on your screen, that would be greatly appreciated. And your choices are implementation time, investment cost, or integration complexity. So we'll give you a few minutes there to, well, not a few minutes, but some time here to answer that question for us. And at this time, and then we'll go ahead and we'll show the responses for you. All right.
Okay. Thank you. That was a quick turnaround. I'm a little bit surprised and not too much surprised. The implementation time, nobody clicked on implementation time because typically it is in our environment quite intense to implement new solutions into the network. And if you wouldn't mind moving on with the slides as well. So the implementation time, due to the complexity of C-store setups, dealing with forecourts, dealing with different IT provider and so forth, it can take from weeks, but in many cases it takes months up to a year. And that is driving at the end of the day, and that's why obviously investment cost is a big point. The investment cost as well, because implementation is done by experts, and usually you have to pay for the experts. And they're charging quite a bit of a daily rate. So the investment costs are quite significant. And that means the main driver is, at the end of the day, the integration complexity and due to the fact that there are so many different interaction points. Again, you have a forecourt, you have a POS system, you have a payment system, you have a back office system. So there are so many touch points in regards of the IT. How do I address this? And I come to this point in a minute. Just want to turn one more slide and share another figure, another feedback figure we got out of our customer base. About half of the existing C-stores are considering or planning already to implement self-checkout. So on the one end, it's time to consider it as well, because you never want to be the last one in the chain. You want to attract your customer and not move them to the neighbors because they have already self-checkout or kiosk systems implemented. And on the other side, if you are into that business, if you are leading it, you want to have really the leading edge and want to be fast and want to be fast in the market. So what can we do? What can we provide, and how can we cut the implementation time back? And if you wouldn't mind moving on, next slide. So first of all, we need to address something, and I want to come back to my initial points: improve revenue. So with the introduction of self-checkout, there is obviously also the opportunity to, first of all, use the screen, like Richa was saying earlier. Use it for advertisement, or use it for loyalty information, or for simple customer information during idle times. But use it also to attract customers to your self-checkout systems and to your offerings. Secondly, you can also use these self-checkout devices or the checkout devices to provide food service, in regards of items, but also produce food, pizzas, burgers, and so forth, and leverage these new implementations in order to support the customers to order the food and to assemble the burger, and so on and so forth. So this second thing is save your customers the time, and that's the main intention here of the self-checkouts. Cut the checkout time as shortest possible interaction, and by providing not only one attendant, or in some peak hours 2 attendants, you can easily add on several of these devices, and we call it, run it as a hybrid means. You have one side facing to the customer, the back side is facing to your attendant. The attendant can see what's going on the front. So if there's age-restricted items on sale, or if there are other topics where an attendant needs to support the customer during the checkout process, he can easily do it from the back side, from his normal attendant position, and he can handle several of self-checkouts and still his normal POS at the same time. So you can way more efficient leverage your attendant you have on site. And then, yeah, I mentioned already custom food orders can be provided here in any way or fashion. So that will also enhance your portfolio if you don't do food at the moment, or it will ease up the way to order food. And then how do we do that? So if you would move on to the last slide, to the next slide, actually. Oh, sorry, one back. So how do we address one of the pain points, the lower cost or low cost to entry? We figured out almost everybody uses one or the other way a back office system. So why not leveraging the interface, the Connexus interface you have anyhow defined to this back office interfaces in order to connect a self-checkout device? And that's what we are doing. We are connecting to this back office system. We get pricing, we get items, we get promotions, we get everything via that back office system, and you have only one integration point. On the other side, on the checkout side, we can either offer an implementation in an independent payment provider, or an implementation into your actual payment provider. So that's also quite simple. There are only basically 2 interfaces you need to address for the implementation into an existing store environment. And then on the other side, where a lot of money gets spent and a lot of professional services and implementation time has to be addressed, it is basically the screen flow. In order to limit this, we did build up a kind of pre-edited screen flow generator, where you as a customer can either set up your own screen flows, or where with very, very simple effort, it takes a day or 2, the screen flow can be adjusted to your store demands. And within days, you can have your self-checkout system integrated and you can have it in your store. On the other side, what we are also providing, and what's very helpful, we recognized, is we do some store analytics together typically, where we measure the store traffic and we analyze the transaction data, and we can pretty close recommend if it doesn't make sense, first of all, to use self-checkout if the volume is there, if the kind of clientele is there. And secondly, if it does make sense to have 1 or 2 self-checkouts, where to position these units. And also in some cases, if you need cash. I mean, we are providing here at the moment on these pictures, on these solutions, the self-checkouts with card payment, but you could add cash. In some states, it's mandatory anyhow. And there are areas where you need to address a very high cash transaction rate. And yeah, that's possible as well. And that we can provide that based on our store analytics at the end of the day. So with this 3-step approach, we are sure we can limit the effort, we can limit the time, and we can limit the spending quite a bit in order to get this program started, or such a program started. And as we are convinced about our capabilities, we are also offering a test drive program. So you can sign into such a program, and we will go through a short journey together with you via a lab installation to present the capabilities and to make you familiar with this kind of functionality, and from there into the store, and give you the opportunity to check and test live these kind of implementations and see by yourself if they are successful or if they don't make sense. So far, I have to say we were quite successful. It always made sense. And these test drive programs were, in many cases, a good eye-opener of what kind of capabilities we can provide with this new offering. So if you're interested, may you use the last poll. And with this, we are at the end of today's webinar. So if you have any questions, please, as mentioned, raise them via the chat, and we try to answer immediately.
Yes, thank you, Yuli. So the last poll question is up there on your screen. If you could just take some time to answer that. We will not be showing your request here, but we'll be passing them along at the conclusion of our webinar. So, and as Yuli mentioned, just go ahead and submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the of your screen there. And we will go ahead and start our Q&A. Yuli, first question that we have here has come in is regarding self-service. My store is known for a personal touch. I don't want to dehumanize or lessen that feeling.
Understand, but I think this is a good tool, a good solution to avoid exactly that. First of all, your existing attendant staff can have more time to take care of the customers, to guide them, to help them a little bit. And on the other side, I mean, the solution will also provide the possibility to customize the transaction. If you use a loyalty program today, that this loyalty program will also be reflected in the transaction with this particular customer, and you can make this interaction quite personal. So it's, I think, a good comparison where everybody has experience already as an ATM. I'm not so sure if you can go in the first step that far, but that are the options with self-checkout as well. Okay. All right.
Yuli, also, so to follow up, how can age-restricted items like cigarettes be sold efficiently in stores with multiple checkout registers?
So what we typically recommend, if a focus or one of the focuses to the stores is alcohol, tobacco, as it is in many cases, to place them close and with the backside to the attendants. We will have a second screen on the attendant side. First of all, the device by itself will indicate that an attendant is necessary with a lane light. It's quite simple. We can turn that from green to amber or to red, if you like. This is configurable. As soon as that is the case, the attendant will hopefully get the attention and can authorize on a screen at the back of these devices the alcohol or tobacco sales. That can also happen in the front, but that's a little bit less efficient because then the attendant has to move in the store, and he may or you may have one attendant who's only taking care of doing these kind of services beside other store services. So both is possible, but we recognize that in normal store setups, the most efficient way to do that is via a second screen on the back.
Okay, thank you for that. So moving on here, we have another question that has come in. It says, can you briefly discuss customer theft as it applies to implementing self-checkouts in C-stores?
Sure. Obviously, yeah, we have this discussion almost every time, but in many, many cases, it's also going as fast away, sorry, as it comes up, because typically, if you have theft today by your customers, they carry out a candy bar or they carry out a soda, they will do it with or without self-checkout. There is not such much of a dramatic increase, and that's also our experience in the market, to be honest. On the other side, many of the theft is also done by, unfortunately, by the own employees, and that will be reduced because the employee is not in the middle of the deal anymore, and he cannot favor the customers, or he cannot do any mistakes. Specifically, if you add to the solution also the opportunity to do cash payment, and with that avoid that the attendees are touching cash at all. I mean, honestly, absolutely right. You can never avoid that somebody walks out with a candy bar, but it doesn't increase. That's what the figure is showing.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Yuli, here's another question for you. How do I determine if my store format can successfully implement self-service and benefit from it?
So what we typically do is, if there's uncertainty, we have some analytic tools where we use transaction data, feed our analytic tools, and we can see based on items, on basket sizes, on transaction rates versus attendees you have, if the store is the right one for self-checkout or for kiosk systems, if the size is there, if the right transactions are there, and so forth. And that's what we are recommending typically. But we also do the other way around. Sometimes you can recognize a store is not the right size, the right format for a self-checkout, and we really don't want to get into that experience. Yeah, spend the effort, the money, all the time into an implementation you can never leverage, and then we come up with a recommendation, stay away from it, better don't do it. Yeah, and typically we also see that about 75% of the stores are good in a certain network, and it makes sense to implement one way or the other self-checkout or kiosk, and the remaining stores are simple too small or there are not enough transactions.
Okay, thank you. Sucharita, I think that we can maybe have you answer this one here. Why do you think C-stores aren't using or offering space for Amazon lockers? And do you think it's solely an Amazon offering, or does FedEx have a similar solution?
There are a number of different players that are offering solutions, including there are private label solutions that can be basically they can be branded, you know, by other third parties. So it is the issue is really about adoption and having you know, kind of the rollout come from a strategic way. And Amazon is certainly the company that has probably invested the most in this. There is an investment that somebody, typically a carrier, needs to make in these solutions, and they're not trivial. And there is also a bit of a chicken or the egg solution in that not every e-commerce site has the locker pickup solution integrated as an option. So it is, it's still emerging and it is growing. The largest ecosystem that is built out is with Amazon. But you know, certainly these will continue to expand and grow as more options are made available to shoppers.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's session. I want to many thanks to Yuli and Sucharita for today's informative discussion, and I want to thank everyone on the line for your time on the call today. As a reminder, we will be sending a link to the replay out along with the presentation slide deck in an email, so keep your eye out on your inboxes tomorrow. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.